Equal challenge, Fiji.
Equal challenge, Fiji. This is Team Aussie Rescue, with the exception of Morgs, who's a paramedic and is on the road right now and is not able to dial in. We thought that we would share some of our experiences from the race, and we've had a bunch of interesting questions come through via socials overnight. So let's just kind of dive deep into them straight away. Actually, maybe everyone can introduce themselves while I'm finding them.
Jared Mitchell, anchor, all-round good guy, backbone of the team. Yeah, that's about it.
Josh Larnott, TAC, keeping everyone in order at camp.
And fed.
Mark Wales, I was the team. I actually didn't have a team position. I was just hauling myself around the course the whole time.
Hey, we couldn't give you anything else because you would have died. So it just survived for you.
But I mean, clicking into that, sometimes having a rook in your team reminds you of like the fundamentals. And Mark was so worried about getting his feet destroyed because in a race that we did prior to Eco Challenge, his feet were destroyed and he was so on top of foot management. And because he was taking time doing it, you know, Jared, myself and Morgs were like, oh, we may as well put talcum powder on our feet. We may as well dry them out, change our socks. And our team had very, very little issues with feet and sports slick.
We had no issues.
We had no issues. And yeah, it's a really good point you make, Sam, because you always use sports slick and it's normally fine, but we found Mark got onto this powder product that really dried your feet out throughout, not just transitions, but out on the course. And yeah, I've done a lot of other races where we've had, you know, feet issues, nothing major, but this took teams out of the race because they didn't manage their feet well. So the combination of sports slick and that powder stuff that Mark sort of introduced to us, we had, nothing, no blisters or anything. So it was a great outcome.
Which is amazing considering your feet are wet the entire time. They're either directly submerged in water when you're on the stand-up paddleboard on any of the water things, or they're just soaked through going through river crossings or, you know, when you're in the jungle. So, and it's a humid, you know, disease-ridden environment potentially. So let's go into some of the questions. Naturally, Kin asked us, tell us about your teammates and how you guys decided to come together. Okay, I'll answer that one because I brought you all together. I was like 6 months after having my son, Mark and my son, I saw the promo for Eco Challenge, and it was the first time after having a child that I was like, I want to get back into the game of like sport because it was quite overwhelming, you know, the unknown of just raising a child for the first time. And actually Jared was the first person that I called to do the race, and he's like, nah, don't have the time. I've got 3 kids. I've got a full-time work. I'm a firefighter. I'm too busy. And in the end, he came on board, which was a blessing in disguise because Jared is our navigator. He had sailing expertise. He's very confident in technical environments. So it was pretty critical. Mark, why did you want to do the race?
I used to make fun of adventure races. I was like, looking at them run around with their lycra and they're all ancient. But when I saw the preview to Eco Challenge, which I didn't even know existed, I was like, holy shit, that looks good. It looked exciting. And the fact that Bear was heading it, I knew that obviously the production team behind it have earned their stripes a million times over. I thought it would be good, but I knew it was going to be a big transition for me because I've never done adventure racing. So whole new beast.
Yeah, and that was a fear I had, bringing Mark on and, having, initially my thoughts were, is Mark just this tokenistic because he's with Sam getting on board? But, so when we had to sort of work through that, we did some pretty intense training sessions to test that. And we did like a 2-day race up in Queensland before and, we pulled through that pretty well. So, that gave us a lot of confidence. Having Morgs as a paramedic, he's highly skilled in adventure racing, but Ian Josh, we sort of knew through a few other people and, had a lot of confidence in him helping us with his enthusiasm in life, which really you need in that sort of role.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Patagonia Eco Challenge is being promoted and teams are applying right now. and the breakdown of our team is 3 experienced adventure racers and ultra athletes. Joshy as an ultra athlete, but hadn't done crewing before, but he was our TAC, and his vibrancy and positivity was what made him so like invaluable as a crew member. And although Mark hadn't done any adventure racing, he's like a former special ops troop commander, has spent a lot of time out in the wild and the remote leading teams. So we know he's hardy, mentally tough. It was just about bringing him up to speed with some of the technical stuff of adventure racing. Heaps of questions here about like, you know, it's a non-stop race. You've got 11 days. When did you sleep?
Yes, I can answer that. So we didn't sleep much. I'll tell you that much. So there was some mandatory stop times, which the race had, which you could do within the camps. And the camps are where we were meeting up with Josh again. So there were 4 camps over the length of the race. So we tried, and there was a little bit more comfort there because Josh set up some pretty good setups there with some bamboo tarps and everything. So that was pretty cool. But so again, those, I think we only slept really a couple of hours, maybe a little bit more in those camps, which were again, comfy, but literally on the ground on a mat. So that was sort of all it was. But again, that felt like, you know, 5 class when you're out there doing this stuff. So that sort of worked all right. And then some other spots, we camped at the top of Vuva Falls after doing that ascent. We were just all pretty spent from that. And it was about 3 a.m. for memory, 2 or 3 a.m. And that was probably the most uncomfortable sleep I had. It was on this like incline. There was another team sort of huddled in next to us. And I just sort of kept falling out of my little bivvy bag. Like we didn't have sleeping bags. So it was just a bivvy bag and all that clothes on pretty much. So we sort of getting wet. The rain was still getting in. So it was pretty uncomfortable. But when you're so fatigued, you can sleep anywhere, you know, and you probably don't think that if you haven't done this stuff, but you literally can. So I'm normally a pretty light sleeper, but after that you can zonk out. I was more concerned if we didn't wake up for a long period of time. So that's what sort of kept waking me up and checking the time, because you're setting alarms, but you can sleep through them. So, yeah, so we did sleep, but very little. Probably compared to other teams, we would have slept probably one of the least, I think.
And I think the main reason for that is, you know, we went into this race with one person inexperienced, and we were, you know, it's called the world's toughest race. And in the race briefing, you know, we were told there's this potential that maybe no teams will finish. And that definitely sets your expectations of, oh my goodness, you know, you've got to push every single moment, make the most of every available moment. And I think that was the right attitude to have, because it did progressively get harder and harder into checkpoint 3, checkpoint 4. And our kind of strategy was to not really stop mid checkpoints. Keep moving, even if we're moving slowly, just keep going. And if we needed to take a 10-minute kip just to regain our thoughts, we would do that. So we only took our bivvies out there. We didn't take a sleeping bag. We didn't take a lilo. We took nothing, because in fact, if we're going to take a 10-minute stop mid-race, we don't want to be too comfortable.
We're not as quick as some of the, you know, faster teams. So we just had to be more efficient on the sleep front and probably have less of it. So, yeah, which hurt. But again, it's surprising how little sleep the body needs.
I think we'll start with Joshy's answer for this. What was your lowest point and highest point as a TAC?
Lowest point as a TAC was after a huge drive to, I think, Camp 2, and arriving pretty late at night, setting up in the rain and just being so tired, falling asleep on the floor of the tent, and then waking up to you guys rolling in and being unorganized.
You had the tent set up, and that was it. Like, you didn't even get a sleeping mat out. You were just down and out.
That was probably the lowest.
And then we came in and we found you asleep in the tent, nothing set up, and you couldn't find the car key. So you're quite rattled.
That was the worst thing I could have done as a TAC.
But it was really cool. Again, and our team came in, we were pretty chirpy coming in, and you know, we just got on with it. We just managed that. So, you know, we're all
want to help at that point.
Yeah. The funniest thing is Joshy was a bit of a shambles when we came to that checkpoint. But it then gave us a massive talking point when we went back out on the course. Oh, Joshy's asleep. He's lost the keys. Or, you know, so it kind of provided a bit of fuel and banter for us because you're so tired. You're wanting ways to get your brain to ignite, to keep going, which is why you hear that teams are singing out there. They're doing riddles. It's everything to engage your brain to keep moving. Jared, what was a highlight for you?
Probably a highlight, I think, for me was getting through that above River Falls, where it was like that 8 to 10K river swimming, jungle sort of bashing stuff. You know, this might sound harsh, but a team was swimming the wrong way downstream and we went past them, and you know, and they didn't say anything, but I think I said to them, "Are you guys all right?" And I think one of them murmured something and was hardly comprehensible. I said, "You know where you're going?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're going to checkpoint 28," which was, again, upstream, and they were heading downstream. So, you know, I said, "Just follow us." I'm pretty confident we know where we are. And sort of an hour or two later, we got to this transition, and there was that hot tent. And so it was a really good accomplishment to get there for our team. And it felt good actually helping another team to get there. I think they pulled out after that leg, that Irish team. They didn't finish the race, but you know, it's nice to help teams out where you can. Like, we're not really racing other teams. We're trying to sort of just, you know, race the course and get through. So that was probably one of the highest. We got to that camp, and there was that drop bag that we'd set up prior to the race.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it had some awesome provisions in there for us, salsa and all this other stuff that you don't normally think too highly of. But yeah, that was really cool getting there. And we knew that was sort of then breaking the back of the race. So there's still a long way to go, still only like halfway through, but that was getting over nearly the peak of, you know, Fiji and the high point. And it was sort of, for the most part, downhill sort of from there.
Well, then I have a question from Crystal. She goes, how cold was that 8-kilometre river swim?
Yeah, so for me, it wasn't too bad. Like, we were well prepared, and I do a fair bit of swimming, ocean swimming and cold water ocean swimming. So it was pretty good for me. We found a few routes throughout that weren't swimming. I think that was quite important to get out of the water, for even if it was for, you know, 15, 20 minutes. So that helped. And I was really working with Mark on trying to find those avenues out of the water. So I think that helped us. Our cameraman at the time, we had an embedded cameraman with us swimming. He had a full neoprene top on. And I remember at one point, I turned around looking at him, and he was like pale as, and yeah, he was getting sort of mild stages of hypothermia for sure. And, you know, he'd climbed Everest twice. He summited Everest twice. He was a bit of a freak himself. But yeah, for us, I think, you know, we were cold, but we were getting through it. And I think we didn't stop, you know, because that's when your body temperature can really drop. So we sort of kept moving, knowing, let's get to that next point and then we can sort of sort ourselves out. So I thought we did that leg really well. And after seeing the show, I think, yeah, I really think we did that leg well.
I think, you know, sometimes strategy, it happens to you and it just works out well. And other times you've got to definitely create it to work. So we decided to go up the falls in the middle of the night. It was raining because we're like, okay, there's no navigation decisions right now. It doesn't matter that it's in the dark. Yes, we're tired, but literally it doesn't matter if we take a long time, we'll just get up it. And the idea for us of sleeping at the bottom of the falls wasn't great because I'm really scared of heights, and trying to sleep whilst just knowing that you've got your biggest fear coming up, it's no point. You may as well just go and attack it and get up to the top. I've got to say, like, it didn't feel like an 8K swim to me because Jared did go into the jungle so many times. I reckon we did about 4Ks in the river.
Yeah.
That, I remember the race at the checkpoint just before we went to it, the race director leans over, Kevin, and said to me, get to checkpoint 22. It's your Waterloo. It's like the battle. And I thought it was like, all the staff are talking about this like it's a big deal. It must be a really big deal. So I was nervous about it, but I think we tackled it quite aggressively, which was good. So getting there, getting up at night, and then we were up and heading to the water just before first light because you got us up, Jared. And by the time we were in there, we're tackling it during daylight, and we got all the way through it and through that warm point in the daytime, which made a big difference.
To credit like the camera people who were with us, I mean, it's pretty mind blowing what all the camera crew so all the footage that you see in the river, it's of a like camera person who's not a part of like the racing team, like in the water, swimming, holding a camera up. It's like, I mean, it's kind of like the Bear Grylls style of all his shows. Like the camera crew are athletes themselves, they're adventurers, but they're also doing something else, and they're not looking after themselves because their job is to capture that moment. So I was mind blown by what they were capable of doing. Danielle has asked, please, how did you fit in training having a toddler and also with both parents during the race? So Mark, Jared, and I. Well, we're not one family, but like, so Mark and I are married. We have a toddler. Jared has 3 kids, and a 4th one on the way. So we're definitely well adept at finding ways of training with kids. Mark, what was kind of our strategy for doing it together?
Yeah, I remember. So we lent on daycare and grandparents a bit, and when we had those windows, we'd have a plan to just go out and be on our feet in some capacity. And I really deliberately targeted only my weaknesses. So I was on foot and I was on a bike. I just concentrated on the weaknesses. And that was, I wasn't perfect by the end, but it was enough. So I feel like if you target the right areas in training, you can be far more efficient and time effective. But it was bloody hard. It put us under a lot of stress, both of us doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it did. And we had to tag team, like we couldn't do a lot of our training together. And as a team, you typically want to train together. But if you're parents and you're both doing the race, we would do our separate training during the week. And then on the weekends, as Mark said, we lent on our grandparents. And then our biggest bulks of training is when we would do races leading up to it. So we did a 2-day race up north in Australia. And we did another 30-hour race up north in Australia. And that was high intensity of practicing with your gear, with your teammates, working out team strategy, understanding strengths and weaknesses. I think knowing each other is actually what is required for a team to do well in a race like this.
That technique of coming together and going through a full race iteration is probably worth, I'd say it's worth 5, 6, 7 times more than just individual training, because that's where you make all your mistakes, you get used to the sequence of racing. And we do similar things in special ops. We get together, we do a full mission profile. So that type of training I would prioritize over all others.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And, because we, Sam and I and Morgs had raced a fair bit together. So I sort of knew them, but Mark, we didn't. So you don't have to be super close and aligned to your teammates either. You can build that pretty quickly. So I don't think you need to have that years and years of experience together. Like Mark said, you can figure that out pretty quickly over a couple of day races. So, a 1 hour run, around the tan, probably not, but pushing yourself and testing yourself in race situations, I think is the go. And whether it's actually adventure races or, we signed up for a few ultra marathons, and it might only be 30 or 50K runs, and we ran together. So you can do different things that, like we did some row gaining and orienteering and stuff like that, just to hone in our nav skills. And, it doesn't have to be days and days of racing either. So just change up the disciplines and, just work together and work out your weaknesses. I think one of the other questions was brought in about what did you feel you should have trained more on? Well, we knew we were going to have stand-up paddle boards, but last race we did, it was about a 3 or 4K stand-up paddleboard league. So I sort of said to the team, forget it, we're fine in that. And the first one was 45 kilometres long on day 2. So not surprised Mark fell asleep halfway through that and while standing up and into the water. So that was probably a big one that we probably could have improved on. But again, surprisingly, we did quite well. And even Sam, what are you, Sam? Less than 50 kilos. So to actually just have the strength to pull yourself along, because we individually had stops. It was, you had to do it. Everyone had to do it. So,
I think honesty of yourself, like your own abilities, is really helpful. Like if you can't train as a team together, being able to have conversations where you go like, this is where I sit with this particular discipline. We have a strategy of like brutal honesty, definitely evoked by Jared, where, and some people find it a bit jarring. Like we will say things in the moment and they're like, oh, that's a bit confronting, but we Like, we say it because we never want to hold tension and we want to move things quickly, because when you are so tired and you're mentally and physically exhausted, you can get emotional so super quickly and you can take things personally. So, you know, if I'm struggling on a bike leg, you know, I'd be like, guys, I'm really battling right now. Or even Jared could go, Sam, you look like you're battling right now. Let's put you on tow. And we don't take things personally. We just go like, what is required for the team to move together the best? It's about balancing your energy. If one person is feeling great and one person is really struggling, well, that's not a desirable situation. So you've got to find ways of spreading out the energy load, so you kind of connected as much as you are together. So not someone isn't redlining and someone's going, I feel awesome, I'm just skipping along right now. Like, you can take people's kit, you can carry their pack, and because I can guarantee you 2 days down the track, that could be you in that situation. And it does swap all the time.
You've got to prioritize your teammates, because when you've got a low moment, you're going to be backed up. And we saw teams, I don't know if you remember this, Jared, that one that was spread out by maybe 2 or 3 days. That's not motivating to work in a team like that. You're not going to finish quicker if you choose not to help each other. You'll finish slower.
Just in terms of the way, Josh, you went about it, that, you know, the way you fed us, and you nearly knew what we needed even though we couldn't tell you. And that means a lot and helps a lot for, you know, support crews. Which is really important. And to push us along too, sometimes you can really get comfortable in the camps, and to have a TAC or support crew that can sort of push you along, I think is really important too.
Joshy, what would you say to TACS that are going to sign up for the next race?
Don't.
No, do it, but probably work on a structure for when the team comes into camp. So I think that's probably one thing we could have been done. High energy, just be adaptable, because you don't know what you guys are going to come in like. And then, have systems for where you're going to put everything, where stuff should be found, and just be as prepared as possible.
Have a central little hook for the car key. Just put it on there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kit. Like, adventure racing isn't a streamlined sport in most respects. You're doing 5 or 6 different disciplines. You've got wet clothes when you're coming in. You're trying to get dry clothes on. Very quickly, an organised space can become disorganised. And, you know, as racers, we weren't as good at putting our stuff in very clear spots for Joshy to pack it up. So that's definitely something that we would work on better in practicing in transitions.
And we thought we were organised as well with our boxes. Like, going in, our boxes look great, but it still falls apart.
Yeah,
it's pouring rain. You're just trying to pack up, and it's hard. So another question's come in. What stage did we find the most mentally challenging?
The mountain bike. That muddy mountain bike leg.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw a little bit of it on the show, but I feel like it was harder than, I mean, at least for us, it felt harder. Once again, we hit that section in the nighttime. It was raining, and we were, for myself, I don't have a huge amount of upper body strength. And so very quickly, as I was pushing my bike, because you couldn't ride up it, the cogs and everything were getting completely stuck with sticky orange mud, and you're cleaning it out. And then I had to kind of carry mine. The boys had a bit more power to push through a bit of the mud, but then by the end, I reckon we were carrying our bikes over our heads for about 6 hours up the hills.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think for me, that was definitely the hardest point, physically and probably nearly definitely mentally, probably physically up there. And like you said, I think the conditions weren't awesome for us. It just poured rain on the side of our bike legs. So I think the leaders got through that without too much moisture on the trail. And it was an old dozer line, so it was really muddy when it got wet. So I think, Sam's right. We hit it in the worst time, from like 8 p.m. till 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or something. And we were hoping to get through that leg and have hit the dark before the whitewater rafting. We got to the whitewater rafting with 5 minutes to go in the dark zone. So we literally had no time. And again, there was a few other teams there, so we started to get a bit competitive again and go, all right, let's get on the river and sort of cover bouncing down the river in these whitewater rafts. So that was probably the hardest for me. I think, again, our team got a little bit separated, not heaps of distance-wise, but we're normally better than that, and we got quite vulnerable, I think, on our own. And, you know, Morgs and I was sort of pushing to try and get to the top, but, you know, and then it just kept going and going. So, yeah, probably a bit more composure there would have done us some justice and some service. But, yeah, I reckon that was the hardest for us. Whereas other teams talk about that swimming leg, but I think for the most part, that wasn't too bad for us.
The rapids was like weekend at Bernie's because we're all sitting in the rapids, just dead. Just no one was battling. We're just.
Yeah. It was pretty full on rapids. They're like grade 3, grade 4 rapids, and they gave us a map and said, "Watch out for these 3, you know, sections here." And you know, this was what it was like a 30 or 40k paddle or something, and you couldn't pick these sections. So I just like, well, we'll just figure it out when we get there, and we were just bobbling around, you know. Shoes flying out of the boat and stuff. So, but we sort of made that a bit of a recovery. And after seeing the footage on the show, it was actually a pretty cool place. And we did appreciate it a little bit, but probably not as much as we should have.
I was too cockeyed to appreciate it.
Yeah, I think we were so tired at that point. We kind of thought we could dry out our clothes on the white water. And so we had our clothes out, and then all of a sudden, like we nearly got flipped over on the boat because we weren't kind of fully focused. So it probably was a time where if we just spent maybe 20 minutes having a sleep before getting on the water, we could have been a bit more with it. But you're not always going to make great decisions, and on the water, you've got to keep going once you're there. Here's another question, Mark, for you. What was in your backpack?
Heaps.
Fold up pillow. No, I had. What do we have? So there was mandatory gear, right, that was dictated to you, and there was safety equipment, there was some light clothing, there was some thermals. So we packed all that in dry bags and sealed it up and shoved it in there. I carried the TEAM machete, which is maybe, you know, half a kilo. I couldn't use it because my hands were that friggin' swollen. I just couldn't use it at all. So in our pack, we had all that stuff, and then you have your food for about 2.5 days. Plus water. And what I was finding was that food wasn't really the issue for me. Often it was water, because if you ran out of water, you'd find it hard to eat anything else. So my pack weighed about 13 kilos, which is pretty small in comparison to my body weight. In military ops, it's 4, 5, 6 times more than that. So the weight wasn't so much the issue. It was knowing what to pack and how little you could get away with. And I think we took a bit of a risk when we climbed up the Vuva Falls to the water. We decided not to pack neoprene for a lot of us because it was heavy. And then we sucked it up when we got in the water. So you've got to take a few risks, I think, with gear. But you've got to have your mandatory stuff. So it's not a lot of stuff, but you've got to pack it well and you've got to take care of it.
Yeah, and it was, you know, 13 kilos. I think mine was about 15. Sam's was under 10. So again, you don't have them all the same. You got to make it work for the team.
I think my pack was 16 kilos.
Yeah. So well, it was after I put all my rubbish in it. But yeah, and then, you know, and that's when it was dry. You know, that was at the start of the race we weighed it. After these things were saturated, they would have been easily over 20. So
yeah, we took the Mike Closer adventure racing packs, and I thought they were functional, but I think there's other packs that won't take on as much water, but it's hard. You got to have something to work with that range.
Everyone was there were all different types of packs out there, and everyone was saying that their packs were taking on water. So I don't think there's the perfect pack that's going to make it lighter when you're submerged in water. Did we suffer any injuries out there?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question because it's easy to find excuses to pull out. It's sometimes hard to find excuses to keep going. And we had far bigger spills and crashes on bikes and other things and slipping on rocks and smashing our heads than most part you can press on. So we had a few big spills. Like, you know, I never really fall over sort of traversing rocks and slipping up. I fell over probably 50 times over the race, and some of them really uncontrolled, which isn't normally like me. But yeah, it was just sprains and things like that, but no massive breaks. But we spoke about it before the race where we were going to try and, unless it was something really serious like a, you know, good, you know, bone breakage or something like that, we were going to try and press on. So, yeah.
I think there's, going into a race like this, you have to really ask yourselves, like, why are you doing it? because your why has to be not just strong in when you're thinking of it in an idealistic fashion, not being in it. It has to be strong enough to surpass all the obstacles, the cold weather, you know, the mud, the challenging time cutoffs. It has to kind of surpass all that types of stuff. And you also need to be in a team of people who are going to hold you accountable to what was the team's objectives going into it. So we actually did do a bit of a war plan of like, what would be the reasons that we would allow our team to pull out of the race? And we decided as a collective, there were very few reasons that would allow us to give someone the way out. And we're right, we took broken bones were probably the major one. And we said, how much could we support each other? Could we carry each other? You know, if you broke your bike, you know, would you be able to someone kind of carry the parts and then someone run? So we kind of game planned all those ideas going out there. And I just think we all have kids going into it. And so it's a big decision to be away from your families for the training, but also for the race itself, which was 3 weeks over in Fiji. And so we didn't want to have that time away and not make it really count and not also enjoy it. And one of our other teammates that we've used to race with, his name's Leggy, he always says, don't be one of those people that like is hating it in the moment, but then gets to the finishing line and goes, oh, that was the best thing that I've ever done. Remind yourself out there that you chose to do it and you're one of very few people who get this opportunity. So lap it up and find a way to find the lightness.
We even talked about ways, even with a breakage, even with a limb breakage, if it was a non-mobility break, we were going to figure out ways to get to, and there was no internal bleeding, figuring out ways of getting to the checkpoint, because you just don't know what's possible. Like the human body can do a lot when it's injured, and you shouldn't make big decisions when you're under a lot of duress, especially in an adventure race when you can get clear heads or you can get a rest, or you know, just don't quit.
There's so many people that have asked us questions like, we love you guys, we wish you had more airtime. For us, like the experience is the experience. Like we're adventure racers, we love to be out in nature and do this with our team. The objective is to not be on the show. What we feel is like we're incredibly lucky that such a niche sport like adventure racing is being given airtime, full stop. And there was some great stories being shown. So thank you for all those messages. But we get to share our experiences now via our own platforms. And, you know, it also influences the things that we do in our everyday life now moving forward, considering we were lucky enough to have that opportunity. Jared, what did you eat out there?
I sort of eat a lot of snacks, really, like, you know, trail, you know, food, you know, nuts and chocolate, lollies, all sorts of stuff you probably shouldn't in normal day life. But yeah, I sort of eat anything. You go on these crazes where you know, crave salt and things like that. So Josh was awesome. He cooked up some, you know, not just freezer dried meals, but other stuff that he created that, you know, I normally probably don't eat, but I was just chowing it down, and it was good. So I think one of the camps, I think it was Camp 2, before that up to the Vuva Falls, I think I ate like 3 double size freeze dried meals and something else that Josh had whipped up. And that, again, I just needed it at the time. I felt like shit after, but I think it helped me the days after. And another checkpoint, another camp that Josh had set up, I think I had like a third of one of them. So you sometimes don't feel like it, but you got to just try and get it in there. But heaps of little snacks and stuff. And again, just handing it around the team and pushing the team to sort of eat and drink. We sort of had some good electrolytes too that we had to, you know, we had to disinfect water and things like that. But yeah, just anything you can have, but don't wait until you're hungry. So, because then it's too late normally, or it takes a lot of time to get back up to that platform. So, yeah.
What do you think our team's weakest discipline was and why? And that's from the Indian twins.
Yeah, I reckon probably the paddling. But in saying that, our last paddle, I think we did really well. We smoked that other team that we started with, but probably the paddling we just didn't. We were okay, but I reckon that was probably our weakest leg. The rest, I think, the bikes, we managed each other. We supported each other throughout the trekking legs. We were quite good with that, and managing weight. We changed weight throughout the race amongst different packs and people. So yeah, probably for me, the paddling legs. But yeah, again, I didn't think that was a huge weakness, considering when I first saw the maps of that SUP being 40 Ks long, I thought that could be, some couple of days of paddling for us. But we again, just pulled through it and got there.
I think when you know that you're entering a discipline where you're not as skilled on, it's not a bad thing to take like the foot off the accelerator and go, okay, we're going to conserve as much as we can here. This is not where we're going to make up ground. Let's just try and be consistent and just keep moving forward, like one step in front of the other. And then try and capitalize on the legs that you are really good at. So we're a team that's pretty good on foot. Jared's a really great navigator. So he doesn't make too many navigation mistakes. And I would say also, a great thing about our team is even if a mistake is made, like we do not dwell in it. Like Jared made a mistake right at the beginning of the stand-up paddleboard. We went left into an inlet as opposed to kind of keep curving around. That added an extra 8 Ks to our stand-up paddleboard leg. 4 Ks out and then 4 Ks upstream coming back. And we had made up a really good amount of ground and we're in a kind of a good position going into that. And so it was very easy to kind of go like, oh, how many teams have passed us? Like, how much energy have we wasted? And we just don't dwell on it. We don't fight about it. We kind of go quiet for a little bit to just kind of absorb it. And then we just find ways of laughing about it later on.
It'd be good to hear about the nav, or your approach to nav, Jared, because that has a disproportionate impact on your race experience. And we were lucky that you're experienced and good at it. But what's your take on nav for these races? Yeah,
and for me, I always know where I am. I always know where north is, wherever I am, whether I'm in an underground basement or whatever. I just need to know that. So, and that's just been embedded with me as a kid. And I've always been sort of into, the bush and navigation. I do a lot of stuff in my remote firefighting role where I need to navigate. We use some GPS stuff now, but I always also teach all my crew the basics of navigation because, batteries go flat, whereas maps can never go flat. So yeah, that, but I'm more a traditional feel, whereas I know, Mark, you're a bit more technical in nav and, Lego, another guy I race with, he's quite technical too. So a lot of the time I actually don't need the maps too much. I can have a look at them, but then I can sort of go off how I feel and just terrain and just, it's harder at night, obviously. It's more bearings and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just practice. Some of the road gaining and orienteering stuff, they're only small and they can be sort of, in a city stuff, but it gets the thing and it gets you going to do that and keeps that, learning going, I suppose. But yeah, I'm big on that. In Fiji, we really emphasized using waterways, creeks and rivers as sort of guides. Whereas in Australia, you probably try and stay out of them because they've got blackberries and other nasty stuff that's quite overgrown. Whereas in Fiji, they have so much rain that normally the waterways are reasonably open. Whereas in Australia, we try and hit peaks and ridges and things like that. So again, easier to navigate probably, but yeah, if you're in a creek, for the most part, you should know where you are. So yeah, that's probably the key stuff for me. But again, calling it out when you're not sure. And, I know, Mark, you had a bit less experience in nav, but it was still really helpful to talk about it and get your ideas. And I remember you used to break off a little stick and come up to me on the map and say, here, I'm pointing on my finger and we could be in a 1K radius. Whereas you sort of grab this little twig and when you first did, I'm like, what the hell are you doing here? But yeah.
Then I saw you breaking off twigs, and there's actually a photo of you both with a twig going.
Yeah, no, that's right. So but yes, I think we did quite well. That apart from that SUP thing, I think the rest we did really well. There was some really challenging nav on that last, I called it the Savannah trek when we got to that sort of islands leg. That was pretty challenging. And I remember we went down that path for about 500 meters, and then it got really this 6 foot or 10 foot high sort of razor sharp grass stuff. And we said, all right, we're going to go for another 5 minutes. If it doesn't open up, we're going back. Again, we lost probably half an hour doing that, but it was totally the right call. We could have lost the race then and been lost and gone, which I think some other teams did. So, and then after that, again, it's hard to be always on with nav, but you need to sort of try and think about when it's really important to be on and when it's not. So, yeah, but yeah, for the most part, I thought we nabbed really well. Whereas other teams are lost, like I said, for 40 plus hours. Sometimes we were never like that. So
Yeah,
I
And there's,
think about it.
I was going to say too, I think it would help if you don't load the nav responsibilities entirely on one person, because the mental load for it is so high, because you're navigating when you're out there, and then when you're back at camp, you're not resting properly because you are loading the maps up. So it's a big job. So
I think it's good to have someone that ultimately makes the call, and you can get input from everyone. But I think at some point, you don't want two sort of lead navigators that might clash. And I think on the show, you saw that in some of the teams, losing confidence in people. But yeah, or hand it over. And, in some of the other races I've done, I've handed it over in different sections saying, you can lead now, and then I can zone out. And, because even though we slept, you're not sleeping. You're not properly sleeping, I don't think, when you're nabbing like that. So
I think that's a really good point. If you're not the navigator, there are still things that you can do to support the navigator. So this was the first race where I feel like I offered some kind of support to Jared in terms of just him being able to ask me a question. Or when we were on the bike, I had the odometer on my bike, and so like Jared would be like, okay, mark out X amount of distance and tell me when we get there. And so I could just do something so he felt like he could bounce from someone, he could communicate, and it was someone else kind of helping you stay in track a little bit. Also, it was great for me because it kept my mind going and it kept me awake. But the thing that you can also do to support your nav is you can take some of their kit. Like, how can you take a physical load off them so they can mentally focus on their job? Because it doesn't matter if you're a team of 4 super athletes. If you don't go the right way, you're not going to finish the race.
Yeah. And we saw that there's some gun athletes out there that started the race that didn't finish it, or finished, days behind us. So, yeah. Good point.
J. Roddy, people asked about how good is that New Zealand team, and were they really as fast as the show made it appear to be?
Yeah. So they're not super fast athletes. And, like Nathan's 47 or 48 now, but they're just very efficient and they keep going. Their nav's very good. They're efficient in the camps. They're efficient out on the course. So it's just, they work very well together as a team, and they're just solid at all the disciplines. But yeah, they're not like full-blown freak athletes by any means.
But there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in terms of time to be gained in the more technical aspects of the race. So how quickly can your team assemble a bike or a canoe? Can you fix a repair quickly? Can you make sure you don't get lost? If you do that well, you're going to make a lot of time.
And they don't sleep much. And because they are very good at nav, they probably can do their nabbing prep very quickly, and then you get a bit more sleep when they're forced to have the mandatory stops. But outside of their mandatory stops, you don't see them sleeping at all. And I think they are very comfortable with suffering. Like they just accept that is the critical feature of the race, that they're going to feel discomfort. It's not a shock to them when their body's fatigued, when they're, zombie walking because they're so sleep deprived. I think the knowledge of that means that they just kind of keep pushing forward, where some teams would be like, we need to have a 6-hour stop. There's a zillion questions I could answer, but I think the last question is, what would be your advice to a team who is wanting to apply?
Yeah, I think it's got to be more than just your passion for racing. You got to try and put yourself different to the teams. Like it's not just an adventure race. This is a story. It's a production. So it's more than just I'm a good racer. I want to race in a team and test myself. So you got to try and find some other stories amongst your team or yourself as to why you should be there, because there'll be thousands of others trying to do that too. So yeah, that's probably my key thing.
And have it be true though. Like, yes, look for an angle, but like be who you are.
Yeah.
That's what's far more compelling than like manufacturing a story direction purely for the sake of just getting in.
Yeah, and if it's not this show, we'll do another adventure race, do another fun run, do something with your mates. You don't have to do fun runs on your own. You can do it within a team. So, yeah, there's a heap of adventure races around Australia and the world that, have a crack. It can really test you, even the short ones.
100%. Well, we're going to go because we've got to go and look after our kids now. We're actually, 3 of us are in stage 4 lockdown. So it's, Well, it's pretty full on. But, you know, obviously feel free to ask any other questions and we can just get back to you via social media. But thanks for showing an interest in our team's experience. And we hope you love the show as much as we loved being a part of it.
Thanks all.
See ya. Ciao.